one cannot relate it back to the life, then it's very difficult for one to understand what these ayat are mentioning and why these are mentioning certain prophets or certain messengers or certain people or certain names or certain places. Because unless we know the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, there's no way of understanding the Quran in general. There's just no way. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He starts talking about the great prophets that everybody has heard of. And even the Arabs were, for most part, they were aware of these prophets. We know that in a true hadith, one of the statements of the Prophet ﷺ, he talks about the prophets being more than 100,000 prophets, more than 300 messengers. But in the Quran, there's about 25 names that have been mentioned only. And most of these names were names of people that the Meccans and the Ahlul Kitab, the Jews and the Christians, were aware of in their scripture. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give them names that they were not familiar with. Why? Because the reason was not to show knowledge. Okay? A lot of times when we're conversing with people, we'll come up with these hadiths that people have never heard of, or fifth issues that people have never heard of. Why? Because I want to talk about how much I know. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's alim, He doesn't need to explain it. So He wants to give guidance to people. So He wants to relate the message. And this is one of the things that we should look into our community, because we want to relate even the tafsir with what we have, the audience that we have today. And one of the major reasons why there's a disconnect with the Muslims in America and the preaching and education is because when we give khutbatul Jummah, there's a great disconnect. We don't relate the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet, the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ to our times. We always talk about like people are still living back in those days. We're not living in those days. Like those days are over. And now we're living today. And how we're going to follow the guidance that was provided by Allah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talks to these nations, to the Quraish, He relates to them the people that they're familiar with. So who are these people? He first talks about Nuh alayhi salam, Noah, and how his people were destroyed for disobeying Allah. Pay attention. And then he starts talking about Hud alayhi salam. He was sent to the people of Ad. Then he talked, and they were destroyed. Why? Because they disobeyed the Prophet. Number 3, then he talks about Salih alayhi salam, another prophet. And he was sent to Thamud. And the Arabs were aware of who Thamud were, and they used to walk past their places where they used to dwell. And he, subhanahu wa ta'ala, mentioned, look, they were destroyed for disobeying the messenger of God. And then he talks about Lut alayhi salam. And then his people were destroyed for disobeying the Prophet of God. And then he talks about the people of Midian. And then he talks about the Prophet Shu'aib. And what did they do? They disobeyed their Prophet. And they were destroyed for that reason. And then he talks about Musa alayhi salam in greater detail. And what happened with Bani Israel. But he talks about in each prophet, he goes back to their nation. First and foremost, the priority. What is the priority of the Muslim community? What is the priority of the message of the messenger of God? It's Tawheed. It's to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as one Lord. That is the priority. And after that, there are details that if you worship one Lord, you have to obey Him. You can't be, I follow the master, I obey the master, but yet have your own say in matters that relate to the deen. So Surah Al-A'raf was revealed in the last year before, as most of the Mufassirin mentioned, before the Prophet ﷺ made hijrah to Medina. And this is the message. If you do not obey the messenger of God, guess what's going to happen with the Meccans, the Quraish? Disobey the Prophet, you'll be destroyed. And this is what we see, the leadership of Quraish. First year in Medina, the Prophet ﷺ travels and he leaves, makes hijrah, and all 40 of their leaders who come out on the day of Badr to fight the messenger of God, they're all killed, they're all destroyed. And for this reason, the Prophet of God ﷺ is given the message because he's going to overcome these people. He's going to overcome the odds. So one of the last things that I want to mention, inshallah, is one of the ayat of this Musaf, and I feel that it's a very strong ayat, and I want to relate this directly to you in a translation, inshallah. And it says, وَلَقَدْ ذَرَأْنَا لِجَهَنَّمْ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ. There are many people who are going to be, and the jinns in Jahannam. They are going to fill this place. But what is their characteristic? Who are these people who are destined for Jahannam? لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts, but they don't have any understanding. Their hearts don't understand. وَلَهُمْ أَعْيُنٌ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ بِهَا. They have eyes, but they can't see with those eyes. وَلَهُمْ آذَانٌ لَا يَسْمَعُونَ بِهَا. They have ears, but they can't hear with these ears. أُولَٰئِكَ كَالْأَنْعَامِ. They are like cattle. بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ. But rather they are worse than cattle, animals. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ. Because they are in a state of ghaflat, heedlessness from the message of Allah, what He has revealed and what the Messenger has brought. And if we behave like ghafilun, we're just like al-an'am. The last surah that we covered, right before Al-A'raf, Surah Al-An'am. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, don't be like Al-An'am. Don't be like cattle. Graze, eat food, and then walk around, and this is how they spend their life till they drop over and dead. And then the next day, they're not going to be responsible for answering for what they have done, but we are going to be. Because that's the reason these people are worse than Al-An'am, the cattle. So with this, we stop, inshallah, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us an understanding and tawfiq to be amongst those people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our prayers and inshallah our Islam. Assalamu alaikum.